And now we're back to our studio and our patiently waiting guest here, Frans-Paul from the Klingendale Institute. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Very good, Nikos.
Thank you. Yes. Great. So welcome. Frans-Paul, you are a researcher. You're a typical academic, right?
That's right. So Klingendale is a think tank. It's a research institute, and we focus mainly on international relations. So we look at things particularly from a international political point of view.
So the first question that comes in mind is, why would the Belt and Road Initiative be an important research topic for Klingendale?
Well, for us, I mean, my work is focused on China, and also for Klingendale as an institute, China has become a very important topic. And when we look at the international political role of China, to understand this, we have to look at the economic side, because things are changing in the world because China is becoming more influential, and it's particularly because China is has become a very big economic actor. So we need to focus on the economic side to be able to understand the political implications, but also to understand the political elements that influence the economic relations of China. And I think the New Silk Road is an excellent example and an important element of China's international economic presence.
So this is the research angle that you use, right? The underlying political issues behind economical and business expansion, right?
That's correct, yeah. It's especially the interaction between the international political developments and the international economic developments.
Okay. What is the main message that you would like to express and transmit during the European Silk Road Summit this year?
For me, the main point is to emphasize that that there's a bigger context within which the New Silk Road has developed so far and will continue to develop in the future, and that geopolitics is increasingly a part of this bigger picture. What we see is an increasing combination between economic elements and geopolitical elements. So it's no longer, I think today already, it's no longer possible to focus only on economic developments without looking at the geopolitics, but also the other way around.
Okay. You also attended the European Silk Road Summit back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, right? Has the situation between Europe and China changed or improved at all?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's really interesting for me to follow the New Silk Road Summit through the years. I've also attended the first edition 5 years ago, so it's great also to be back now. And what has changed between China and Europe is that I think on the one hand the economic ties have become even more integrated. So the economic integration has been increasing, while at the same time the political relations at the political level, the relations have become more difficult. Just to name some important developments that took place since 2018, it's that the European Union, the European Commission, published a report in 2019 saying that, well, you know, China is, for us, for the European Union, China is an international partner, is an economic competitor, but it's also a systemic rival. And this really caught the attention from the Chinese government and was interpreted by the Chinese government as, well, a more critical attitude from the European side. And I think this is indeed the case. And then just recently, more recently in this year, there were sanctions and counter-sanctions. So sanctions from the EU on China and counter-sanctions from China on the EU, which have made the international, let's say, the political relations between the two sides more complicated.
And how do these complicated political relations impact the actual business on the New Silk Road?
The interesting thing about the New Silk Road, if I look at the development over the last 10 years, so of the history of the New Silk Road since it just began, is that I think in the early phase there were a lot of people having doubts about the feasibility of the New Silk Road. People thinking that, okay, maybe it's just something that is artificially created with support, you know, with a lot of subsidies from the Chinese government, but it will never have a big impact on the actual economic relations between Europe and China. While at the same time, at that time, many people also thought that, well, it's not politically, it's also not very relevant. And I think now it's changing very rapidly. I think it's become much more visible now that the New Silk Road actually has proven to be very feasible and is something that we have to take into account that will continue to develop. So economically it's becoming more important. But that also means that it will probably attract increasing political attention. And I think the New Silk Road is really a symbol also of increasing integration throughout Eurasia. So China, Europe, but also Russia. And this is at a time when the geopolitical tensions between the West and on the one hand and Russia and China on the other hand are increasing. So it's likely that that people in the future will focus more on this symbol of Eurasian integration and ask if this is really if this is not an economic phenomenon that is going against the main direction of geopolitics.
So there could be a conflict between the economics and geopolitics, right?
That is something that we have to take into account, that there will be some increasing contradiction there.
Okay, now we're talking about geopolitics, economics. These can be potentially quite difficult topics to comprehend and digest. I want to ask a very specific question. In the introduction of your presentation, you mentioned that people say that China launched the Belt and Road Initiative as a response to the geopolitical rivalry with the US. Can you explain this a bit? How can the New Silk Road and the Belt Road Initiative can become a political tool, as I understand it, right?
Yes, I would say it has several functions for the Chinese government. It's also an economic tool, but it's also a political tool. I think, in my view, it's not a coincidence that the Chinese government launched the New Silk Road at the time, so around 10 years ago, at the same time when the geopolitical tensions between China and the United States began to increase. They have been increasing ever since, over the past 10 years. But what happened around that time is that the United States, which has a very strong military presence in East Asia, began to be more concerned about China's expanding economic influence in that region, in Asia. So the United States began to put more pressure on China through its military presence. And I think this was an extra impulse for the Chinese government to look more west, to look at its economic relations with the rest of Asia, but also with Europe, and to be more concerned about the resilience of the trade connections between China and Europe, because Europe is an important market, of course, an export market for China. Europe is a very important economic partner, and I think the New Silk Road serves a strategic interest for China because it provides China and international companies with additional options to have, transport connections between the European Union and China.
Now, I'm very interested because you mentioned before that the European Union sees China as a systemic rival, right? So we can still see how China is economically expanding towards Europe, for instance, with COSCO ports, etc., etc. Apart from sanctions, what else can Europe do in order to secure that there will be a level playing field between the two parties?
I think one of the main concerns on the European side is the role of Chinese state-owned entities, or let's say the role of the Chinese government in the economic relations with the European Union. So whereas the European Union prefers to have purely business-to-business, meaning purely private actors, there is a certain role of the Chinese government. So as China increasingly is being regarded as a systemic rival, this then also raises the concern on the European side and raises the question, to what extent should Chinese commercial entities be allowed to play a major role in this important connection with China? So I think in addition to sanctions, there could also be considerations with regard to access to, so for Chinese companies to be able to invest in Europe, or to be able to play dominant roles in certain market sectors.
Okay, I guess that you will discuss about all these topics in detail during your presentation in the European Silk Road Summit, but you're not going to do the presentation alone, right? You're going to have it with one of your colleagues.
A very important point, and I should mention my colleague, Xiaoxue Martin, who is also a China researcher at Klingendahl, and we will do the presentation together.
Okay, but after the presentation, there is a debate with the audience, between you and the audience, so maybe you give us a sneak preview of what the points you would like to address, any specific issues?
Well, for me, the interesting thing about the New Silk Road Summit, and also the exciting thing about this kind of debate, is to bring together the more, let's say, the operational logistical side and the broader geopolitical context. And, and you know, maybe in the short term, on a day-to-day basis, the geopolitics are not very visible. But for the longer term development, if we look into the future, try to understand where all this is going, then I think the interaction between those two sides is very important.
Okay. And what do you expect to learn from the European Silk Road Summit? What added value could it bring to your research?
Well, for me, and this was also the case with previous editions, it gives me a very good perspective on what are the issues that are relevant for the actual companies who are making the Silk Road work. And how do they look at the future? What do they expect? Are they optimistic? Do they expect even further expansion of the new Silk Road? So that kind of insights are very relevant for me as a researcher.
Okay, sounds great. Then Frans-Paul, thank you very much for being here today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Amsterdam, right?
I also look forward to be there.
Perfect.